Canada's national parks protect 328,198 square kilometers of land. 39 parks, 8 park reserves, and more than 15 million visits in a single year. Almost every one of those people walks back out. The ones who don't have become a genre. Today we are going to look at a park larger than Switzerland that recorded 2,399 visitors in a year. A glacier that swallowed a man in May and can hand a body back 5 decades later, kilometers from where he died. A forensic study where scientists who knew the exact spot they left, remains recovered 22% of them. And a newspaper reporter who flew into a frozen northern valley in February 1947 looking for a tropical paradise and accidentally manufactured Canada's most famous curse. Stick with us to the end, because number 1 is a single line in a national police database. It was opened in 1919. It is still open today. If you like these deep dives into the parts of this country nobody puts on a postcard, hit subscribe. We post one of these every week. Today we are counting down 10 mechanisms. 10 documented reasons people vanish in Canada's national parks. Number 10. The denominator. 15 million people walk in. Before you ask why so many people vanish in Canada's national parks, you have to ask a much duller question first. How many people go in? In 2024 to 2025, over 15 million people visited Canada's national parks. Banff alone drew 4,230,156 of them, making it the most visited park in the country. Its daily average attendance works out to roughly 11,315 people. That is a mid-sized town's worth of strangers arriving at the edge of avalanche terrain every day, all year. Parks Canada is legally responsible for visitor safety on every piece of land and inland water it administers. That responsibility is written into the Canada National Parks Act. It covers 39 national parks, 8 park reserves, and roughly 328,198 square kilometers of ground. Search and rescue incidents in the mountain parks rose about 19% in 2025. That sounds ominous until you read the explanation attached to it, which is tourism. More people, more calls. Banff's independent visitor count from the 1st of April to the end of August of 2025 was 2,580,221, up about 8% on the previous year. Every mysterious disappearance statistic you have ever seen is a numerator. It is a count of the missing with nothing underneath it. The entire genre works by never showing you the bottom of the fraction. Show it, and the arithmetic does most of the work for you. Number 9. The scale problem. Bigger than Switzerland, emptier than anywhere. Wood Buffalo National Park covers 44,741 square kilometers across northeastern Alberta and the southern Northwest Territories. It is larger than Switzerland. It is the second largest national park on Earth. In 2022 to 2023, it recorded 2,399 visitors. Banff gets more than that before lunch. The park was established in 1922 to protect the last free-roaming bison herds and became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. Headquarters is in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, with a satellite office down in Fort Chipewyan, Alberta. Between them sits a largely roadless expanse of boreal forest, salt plains, gypsum karst, and freshwater delta. It is also the world's largest dark sky preserve, which is a poetic way of saying there is nothing out there generating light. Most people picture a national park as Banff. Signposted, patrolled, full of witnesses. Wood Buffalo is the other Canada. Parks Canada's own internal evaluation of its visitor safety program is blunt about what this costs. In the northern parks, search and rescue expenses run high relative to the number of incidents, purely because of remoteness and terrain. Those parks depend on visitor safety staff flown in from the mountain parks to carry out technical rescues. The same evaluation logged 22 visitor safety incidents across all northern parks in 2017. So the response does not wait nearby. It has to arrive, often by air, often the next day. There is a landmark inside this park that makes the point better than any statistic can. The world's largest beaver dam sits in the southern end of Wood Buffalo. It is 800 meters long. It is visible from space. It is unreachable by any road or trail, and park staff can only check on it by charter plane. If something that big can only be found from the air, so can a person. Number 8. The lost brain. Don't expect a missing person to be rational. An 8-year-old boy went missing in a Virginia state park. He found a trail with white blazes painted on the trees and made a decision that seemed entirely sensible to him. Follow it until it ends. 16 miles later, he spotted a house, knocked on the door, and asked for a sandwich so he could keep going. He was on the Appalachian Trail. It had about 1,000 miles left. That story is not a curiosity. It is data, and it belongs to a man named Robert Custer, who holds a PhD in search theory and built the International Search and Rescue Incident Database. ISRID held about 31,100 cases in 2008. By 2017, it held over 145,000. It has kept growing since. Custer's 2008 book, Lost Person Behavior, sorts subjects into roughly 42 behavioral categories: hikers, hunters, children, people with dementia, anglers, mountain bikers. Each category comes with its own statistics on distance traveled from the point last seen and on elevation change. Searchers use those numbers to draw range rings on a map before anyone sets foot in the field. The book also documents the specific strategies lost people fall back on. Route traveling, where you find any trail at all and commit to it. Direction traveling, where you pick a bearing and hold it. Contouring, where you refuse to go up or down and simply walk the same elevation until something changes. Hikers show a documented tendency to move downhill and follow drainages. Linear features, streams, trails, roads, fences, railways account for the largest share of hiker-find locations. An intended direction of travel turns out to be a poor predictor of where anybody is actually found. Custer's own summary of his field is that you should not expect a missing person to be making rational decisions. Once someone realizes they are lost, basic fight, flight, or freeze takes over. Mystery content leans very hard on one image. The body recovered 12 miles out, up terrain the person could not possibly have climbed. Custer's entire career is the answer to that image. A person in panic is not hiking. They are running a broken navigation algorithm, and it produces distances and elevation gains that look impossible on a map afterwards. Searchers stopped being surprised by this decades ago. The internet never got the memo. Number 7. The water. 15 meters from safety. Alan Hobler manages Kamloops Search and Rescue. He has said that across his years in the job, he has never seen anyone killed by a cougar or a bear. He has seen dozens upon dozens upon dozens of people who had drowned. That is the sentence that should reframe this entire subject, and almost nobody in the genre quotes it. Roughly 400 people drown in Canada every year. Drowning is the third leading cause of accidental death in the country, and the second leading cause for children. 2/3 of those deaths happen between May and September, which is exactly when the parks are full. Between 2015 and 2020, there were 1,768 drownings nationally, with nearly half of them in lakes or ponds. In British Columbia, most drownings happen in natural settings. Lakes and ponds account for around 35%. Rivers are close behind at 30%. The ocean comes third at 15%. Nearly 80% of BC victims are men. Alcohol and being alone are recurring factors. And here is the number that matters most. Almost 70% of drowning victims never intended to enter the water at all. Most were within 15 meters of safety. They slipped on a wet rock. They reached for a dropped phone. They waded in to cool off. They were close enough to shore to touch it. Now apply all of that to a glacier-fed river in the Rockies in late spring, at peak melt, when the flow is highest and coldest and fastest. Cold water shock triggers involuntary gasping within seconds. River noise in a canyon is loud enough to bury a shout from 10 meters away. There is no visible struggle because there is nobody close enough to see it and nothing quiet enough to hear it. Then the current does the rest. Log jams, undercut banks, silt. The trailhead register says they went for a hike. The last 100 meters of that hike happened underwater and the search grid was drawn on land. Number 6. The ice conveyor belt. the glacier gives them back. On the 12th of May, 2026, 3 friends were descending the Athabasca Glacier from the south ridge of Mount Andromeda in Jasper National Park. Near the top of the highest icefall, one of them, a 38-year-old man, a Czech citizen living in Revelstoke, fell about 25 meters into a crevasse. His group was equipped for crevasse rescue. They tried to reach him. They could not because of the multiple crevasses surrounding the one he was in. Parks Canada visitor safety specialists descended into it at roughly 7:30 that evening and confirmed he had died of injuries from the fall. Recovery was not possible until the 14th because of weather and conditions. 2 days with a team that knew exactly where he was. That is the near end of the timeline. Here is the far end. A glacier does not hide a body. It moves it. Ice in the high accumulation zone flows downhill continuously and imperceptibly, carrying everything inside it toward the ablation zone lower down, where melting is fastest. A person lost near the top of a glacier can be delivered kilometers from where they died decades later. In August 2024, remains were found in Austria roughly 700 meters below a glacier. DNA analysis matched them to a 30-year-old German man who had fallen into a crevasse in 1967. 57 years. Both halves of that are glaciology. Neither half is a mystery, and the process is accelerating. Global glacier loss has averaged around 301 billion tons a year since 2000, and the rate rose by roughly 36% in the second half of that period. More ice melting means more remains surfacing, not fewer. Parks Canada's own guidance states that this terrain demands considerable skill and knowledge. Crevasse rescue, whiteout navigation, all of it. The edge of the Athabasca Glacier is within easy walking distance of the Icefields Parkway. Tourists photograph it in sandals. The Krivelsfield that killed a properly equipped skier starts a short distance past where the parking lot ends. If you are finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up. And I want to know in the comments which of these mechanisms you had never heard of before, because the glacier one catches most people off guard. We read every single one. The back half of this list gets harder. The next 4 are about what happens to a body, and to a search when nobody finds it in time. Number 5. The cold that looks like a crime. They take their clothes off and crawl under something. A body is found partly or completely undressed, wedged into somewhere it should not be. Under furniture, behind an object, deep in a hollow. Investigators arrive and read the scene as an assault, followed by an attempt to conceal the victim. That reading has been wrong often enough that the mistake itself is now documented in the forensic literature. Hypothermia is defined as core body temperature dropping below 35 degrees Celsius. In the late stages, the muscles maintaining vasoconstriction, the ones holding warm blood in the core, become exhausted and fail. Blood floods back to the extremities. The victim, already confused and disoriented, experiences a sensation of intense heat. So they take their clothes off. It has a name. Paradoxical undressing. The earliest formal description of it was published in 1979 in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. Then there is the part that comes after. Rothschild and Schneider examined 69 lethal hypothermia cases at their institute between 1978 and 1994 and published the results in the International Journal of Legal Medicine in 1995. Paradoxical undressing appeared in 25% of those cases, and nearly every disrobed body was found in a position indicating a final act of self-protection. Under a bed, behind a wardrobe, inside a shelf. They named it terminal burrowing behavior and described it as an autonomous brainstem process, a primitive protective instinct resembling the burrowing of hibernating animals. It occurred predominantly with slow temperature decreases in moderately cold conditions. Not extreme cold. Moderate cold. A wet 4-degree night in subalpine forest is the documented risk zone, not -30. The forensic notes contain the detail that settles the sequence beyond argument. Those final positions could only be reached by crawling, and the bodies carried abrasions to the knees and elbows to prove it. The removed clothing showed no corresponding damage at all. They undressed first, then they crawled. Ask anyone deep in this genre for their single most disturbing detail, and you will get some version of that scene. It is not evidence of a predator or a person or a phenomenon. It is a textbook written 30 years ago describing the last thing a freezing brain does to try to save itself. Number 4. Why searchers? Walk past. They searched that meadow. Twice. Here's the thing about a grid search. 100 volunteers walk shoulder to shoulder through a meadow and find nothing. Weeks later, somebody finds a body in the middle of that same meadow. In the retelling, that becomes proof the body was moved there afterwards. In search and rescue, it is a number that everyone already knows. Probability of detection. POD. The formal likelihood that a team would have found the subject if the subject was actually inside the segment they searched. POD splits into 2 categories, and the gap between them is the whole story. A responsive subject can shout back, blow a whistle, wave at a passing light. Responsive POD is generally high. An unresponsive subject, deceased, unconscious, or too exhausted to answer, can do none of that. A hasty team moving fast along a trail has high unresponsive POD on the route itself, and much lower POD even a short distance off it. Search managers know this, which is why they use Bayesian segment prioritization. Resources are, in the words of one search and rescue journal, virtually never sufficient to look everywhere the subject could be. So you rank the ground and you accept the rest. Terrain-based modeling by Matt Jacobs found subjects were far more likely to be found in low-lying streams than in mid-slope ones, and recommended weighting streams equally with trails. A United States Coast Guard Commission review went further, finding that land search planning largely evolved out of ad hoc operational trial and error from the 1970s onward, with limited grounding in the formal search theory used at sea and in the air. And POD itself is usually assigned by a field leader at the end of a long shift, using experience and judgment rather than any instrument. It is explicitly not an exact science. One searcher described the process as gut instinct plus a certain amount of wishful thinking. That admitted uncertainty is written into the official record of every search ever run. The genre reads a second pass discovery as impossible. Search managers read it as Tuesday. Number 3. What the forest does. 22%. In August 2021 and again in August 2022, Canadian forensic researchers drove out into wilderness near Calgary and Edmonton and left clothed pig carcasses on the ground. 4 per city, each time in both open and closed canopy habitat. Pigs are the standard analog for human remains in this kind of work. They recorded the exact locations. Then they went away and came back 10 to 12 months later to find out how much was left to find. The mean recovery rate of skeletal elements was 22.5%. The range ran from 66.9% at the best site down to 2% at the worst. Read that again with the conditions in mind. These were researchers who knew precisely where they had placed the remains, searching a defined radius, using proper method, actively trying to recover everything. On average, they got back less than a quarter of it. A real search does not know the point. The dispersal came from the scavenger guild. Where sites fell inside bear territory, black and grizzly bears were the dominant scavengers, and large mammals accounted for most of the soft tissue loss and the movement of bone that followed. Maximum dispersal distances at the Calgary rural sites reached 60 to 70 meters, associated with grizzlies and canids. Limbs traveled furthest. A parallel study in southeastern British Columbia identified that region's scavengers as turkey vultures, corvids, American black bears, and coyotes. And there was no statistical difference in dispersal between open and closed habitat. You do not need deep forest for this. Foothills grassland does it too. The stated purpose of the research is entirely practical. It exists to tell search teams how and where to look for human remains. Now hold all of that against the phrase that closes 1,000 mystery videos. They never found a trace. A body left through one Canadian winter is not a body anymore. It is a scatter of elements across up to 70 meters of ground, most of which nobody will ever recover. The absence of remains tells you nothing about how someone died. It only tells you how long the forest had them. Number 2. The Myth Factory. A reporter invented Headless Valley in 1947. In February 1947, a journalist named Pierre Berton led an expedition into the South Nahanni River Valley in the Northwest Territories in the depths of winter to look for a secret tropical paradise. Sit with that for a second. February, above the 60th parallel, looking for the tropics. He did not find one. He filed the story anyway, and his syndicated reports for the Vancouver Sun became one of the largest media spectacles of the early post-war period in Canada. That coverage set in motion the chain of events that eventually led to the establishment of Nahanni National Park Reserve in 1976. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site 2 years after that. The thing Burton was chasing is known collectively as the Legend of Headless Valley, and it is not one story. It is a composite, a hidden tropical valley, a lost gold mine, decapitated prospectors, evil spirits, cave-dwelling monsters, a tribe of headhunters, all of it bundled together and sold as a single mystery. Underneath the bundle there is a real seed. According to accounts from the time, 2 brothers, Frank and Willie McLeod, went into the valley prospecting and did not return. A search led by their brother Charlie found remains at a camp on the river's edge. The dates in the surviving sources disagree with one another, and the description of the bodies comes from period reporting rather than from any modern forensic record. Mid-century officials offered explanations that were considerably less interesting. RCMP files described treacherous terrain, an unpredictable river, and winters severe enough to erase both evidence and bodies. Historians pointed to murder, to starvation, and to bears drawn in by food caches. Even the tropical valley has a mundane basis. The region's hot springs genuinely do create warmer microclimates. Warm, not tropical. But by then the legend had done something permanent. Dead Men Valley, Headless Creek, the Funeral Range. Those names went onto official maps, a landscape formally labeled by its own folklore. Then in the 1960s and 70s, magazines and film crews arrived to cover the legend that the 1947 coverage had created. There is a peer-reviewed history of all this published in the Northern Review. The authors summarize what they are examining in the title as a mixture of history, myth, and bullshit. That loop, real deaths, then sensational coverage, then coverage of the coverage, is the exact machine that produced the modern missing persons genre 60 years later. Nahanni was the prototype. Everything since has been a remake. Number 1. The 1%. 540. It is the end of the season, and there is 1 car left in the trailhead parking lot. The gravel is empty all around it. There is frost on the windshield thick enough that you cannot see inside. An outhouse door is banging somewhere in the wind. Past the tree line there is nothing but the wind itself, moving through spruce, going on like that for kilometers in every direction. There is a wooden box on a post at the trailhead with a register inside. Damp paper, a pen on a string. Names, dates, intended routes, running back through the whole summer. Near the bottom of the page there is 1 signature with no matching return entry beside it. Snow is starting to come in over the search area. Here are the numbers behind that image. In 2025, Canada recorded 68,349 missing persons. When the RCMP's National Center for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains extracted its data on the 2nd of February 2026, 540 of those people were still missing. 1%. RCMP research covering 2015 to 2021 found that 95% of all missing persons cases, adults and children together, were resolved within 30 days. The RCMP's own public position is that in a typical year, somewhere between 70 and 80,000 people are reported missing in Canada, and most are found within 7 days. Between 2015 and 2021, 88% of all reports were runaways, and 70% of resolved runaway cases closed within 3 days. The most common resolution by a very wide margin is the person being located alive. There is one further note in that data, and it is the most honest thing in this entire video. The center states plainly that not every missing person is reported to police, and not every reported case is entered into the national database, especially the ones resolved quickly. The system undercounts the boring outcomes. It captures the dramatic ones. That bias sits inside the source data itself. It is a large part of why this looks like a phenomenon, so here is what all of it comes to: enormous terrain with nobody in it. A panicking brain running a broken navigation algorithm, cold water taking people who never meant to get into it, ice carrying bodies downhill for 50 years, moderate cold producing death scenes that police mistake for murders, search grids that are probabilities rather than guarantees, and a forest that disperses what is left across 70 meters of ground before the next spring. Between them, those 7 things account for the 1%. There is no entity in the woods. What there is a filing system. RCMP guidance confirms that missing person files are never closed. They stay active indefinitely until the person is accounted for. Across all previous years, 8,329 occurrences remain open. The oldest one in the database was opened in 1919. It is still there. Nobody has stopped looking on paper for more than a century. That is the part the mystery videos never reach. Behind the number that gets inflated into a monster, there is a family and a case file, and an institution that refuses to write an ending. They are not waiting for an answer about something in the trees. They are just waiting. Canada's parks are not haunted. They are very large, very cold, and completely indifferent, and that is a much harder thing to build a thumbnail around. For me, it is number 2. A reporter went looking for a jungle in February and accidentally built a curse that outlived him by decades. Which one landed hardest for you? Tell me in the comments. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe.